for a second, let's go over to J.D. Vance. Now, I want to continue to bring this to the front of the congregation because what doesn't get highlighted, let me say that again, what doesn't get highlighted from the media and social media influencers and what's not popular is the fact that Trump and J.D. Vance continue to take these off-the-cuff interviews and questions from reporters, and they keep going in hostile territory. They regularly show up and appear in places where people are expecting them to traditionally never go to and take the questions off script, no problems. Hit me with it. Hit me with your best question, and I'll answer it truthfully and to the best of my ability. But the one thing that I'm not going to do is prevent you from asking the questions that you want to ask. Meanwhile, we haven't seen anybody from the Kamala Harris campaign, neither Tim Walz, because they travel together. They travel in a bus together with their wives and their husbands or whatever, and we have not seen the Harris campaign or Tim Walz himself sit in an interview on Fox News or any hostile territory or anything like that. We haven't seen anything whatsoever. And so I'm very much impressed with J.D. Vance. I didn't know a lot about him before him being picked as a vice presidential candidate, but I'm very, very impressed with J.D. Vance, especially sitting in front of another black woman. No, is that this? Hold on, wait. Is that the same black woman that went after Trump? Hold on, let me see something. Trump, NABJ. I think that's the same black woman. What is her name? Oh, yeah, that's definitely her. That is her. That is 100% her. 100% that is her. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So he's still so wait a minute. They still don't mind going into hostile enemy territory. Question for everybody that supports the Democrats. I think it's a fair question to ask. Shout out to my dog, Eric Daniels. He's the leader of the liberals inside of the chat. He likes to act like he's not really liberal and that he's really independent, but he's the leader of the liberals. Here's my question for the people that's in the chat that kind of champions the Democratic cause and that has a vested interest. That is absolutely her. That is 100% her. You're not going to sit here and tell me that that's not her. Here's my question. Same pantsuits and everything. Y'all telling me that that's not her? It looked like her. All right, hold on. Let me see something. That's not her? So she be on ABC. Y'all telling me that don't look like her? What's her name? Y'all saying that I said that all black people look the same? Let me get it close. Kristen Welker. That's her name. That's what y'all saying. Kristen Welker versus who? She don't look the same as her? Kristen Welker. Let me look up Kristen Welker. Oh, that ain't her. You're right. Kristen kind of look good, though, on the low, though. Kristen Welker and ABC. Rachel Scott. Oh, y'all was right. All right, I'll take that, L. I just want to do a compare and contrast. The other one name is Rachel Scott. Is it Rachel Scott? Oh, dang, they don't look nothing alike. Well, listen, they both women of color, right? They both women of color. I thought that we all got the same designations. No, we're not using the same designations. They both women of color, right? They don't look the same, I'll give you that much. And she got a little bit more of a square jaw. Look, they all designate them as women of color nowadays. It ain't no difference between black and white. Hey, somebody said the bifocals ain't focal, and y'all saying I need a new prescription? Oh, y'all got me sweating in here. All right, let's go ahead and get into this interview. Let's not focus on me. Let's not focus. I warned y'all before the show was even going to start that we was going to be doing what we do and we go off script, all right? Anyways, let's continue.
Senator J.D. Vance, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us here in Cincinnati. Let's start off with the Democratic National Convention.
Sure.
Some of what we heard this past week, Vice President Kamala Harris in making her case.
She just got a lot of makeup on. Y'all can't blame me for that. I don't think I should take the L for this one. I don't think that I should take the L for this one. I'm going to take it, though. I'm going to take my L because y'all keep saying, Anton, you got to take your L. Okay, I'm going to take my L. Y'all said I need to get the Apple Vision Pros. I'm going to take my L. However, she got a lot of makeup on this part. She got a lot of makeup on, all right?
Said that the tariff plans that Donald Trump is proposing will hurt the middle class. Here's what she said specifically, quote,
Sure.
He intends to enact what in effect is a national sales tax, call it a Trump tax, that would raise prices on middle class families by almost $4,000 a year. Now, the estimates vary, but how do you respond to that charge that Trump's tariffs would hurt the middle class?
Yeah, so if you step back a little bit, Kristen, there's this whole thing that Kamala Harris did at the convention where she made a bunch of claims about what would happen and not enough actually reflection on what already happened, right? Because Donald Trump was already president. He used tariffs to bring manufacturing jobs back to our country, and I think he'll do it again. And he did it while keeping prices extremely low. Because if you go back to the Trump presidency, we had 12,000 factories that were built during Donald Trump's presidency. Inflation never really ticked above 2% his entire administration. In fact, was sort of, around.
Let's back that up, though, J.D. Vance. We're not going to skip past that part.
We had 12,000 factories that were built during Donald Trump's presidency.
Let's continue.
Inflation never really ticked above 2% his entire administration. In fact, was sort of, around 1.5% most of the time that he was president. So when Kamala Harris says, if we do the thing that Trump already did, it's going to be way worse than it was last time, I just don't think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, let's talk about
Sure.
Trump's record during his first term. He did impose rounds of tariffs, and it cost Americans nearly $80 billion in new taxes. Do you acknowledge that imposing more tariffs will ultimately cost consumers?
Well, what it really does is it penalizes importers from bringing goods outside the country into the country. And I think that's just a necessary thing. We know that China and a number of other countries are using effectively slave labor to undercut the wages of American workers. Donald Trump thinks that has to stop. And again, what Kamala Harris is saying, Kristen, is that if you do this, you're somehow going to cause skyrocketing inflation. In reality, Donald Trump already did it. He brought a lot of jobs back, and it didn't cause inflation.
But it caused consumers to pay more. They paid more in taxes, $80 billion worth. So, do you acknowledge that consumers ultimately will pay more if there are more tariffs imposed?
So economists...
Do you just acknowledge that?
No, I don't, Kristen, because I think economists really disagree about the effects of tariffs because there can be a dynamic effect, right? So what some economists will say is what you just said, that it will actually raise costs for consumers. But what other people say, and I think the record supports what this other view, is that it causes this dynamic effect where more jobs come into the country. Anything that you lose on the tariff from the perspective of the consumer, you gain in higher wages. So you're ultimately much better off. You have more take-home pay, you have better jobs, and also we have more reliance. Because one of the things we learned during COVID, I don't, by the way, blame Democrats for this, but one of the things we learned during COVID, Kristen, is that if our supply chains are really brittle, if we depend on the Chinese to make too much of our stuff, then prices can skyrocket at a time of crisis. The economists who say that tariffs are bad, they don't take that into account. And we've all learned it the hard way.
And it is economists across the board, really. I mean,
J.D. Vance is I could see why he graduated from Yale. J.D. Vance is sharp. Is sharp. Now, J.D. Vance is the vice presidential candidate. Whether it was J.D. Vance or Vivek Ramaswamy, all of them are more than well prepared to be able to take on this question. And what they're not asking you and what they're not adding into this equation when she's factoring in this question is if the tariffs are so bad, then why did Biden leave them in place? Let me say that again for the people in the back. If the tariffs are so bad, if it was such a bad idea for him to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement, for him to save the steel industry, right? for them to build all of these factories during the Trump administration, for them to also manage and keep inflation at an all-time low while they were doing all of this. And then at the same time, the economy was booming, jobs was booming, people was able to go to the grocery store, gas was low, all across the board, everybody was winning. Everybody was winning. And if the tariffs were so bad that we were levying against China because they unfairly were taking away American jobs and using slave labor in order to continue to infiltrate what was going on in our economy, then why did he leave them in place? He never removed the tariffs. He had the power to do so. Why didn't they do it? I'm waiting. Anybody? Anybody? I'm just curious. Why didn't they do it? Why didn't they take the tariffs out? Oh, Trump's tariffs was horrible. Let's tear them down. Why didn't they do it? Why did they leave them in place? They didn't remove one tariff, not one. They didn't champion it and say, hey, man, we still leaving these tariffs in place. They didn't promote it, but they absolutely left the tariffs in place. Why? Anybody? Somebody? Please.
The Wall Street Journal says economic data showed that Donald Trump's trade war with China did not achieve its objectives of reversing the declines in U.S. manufacturing or reshoring factory jobs. I hear what you're saying. It's a complicated picture, but just on that bottom line point, you can't guarantee that Americans won't wind up paying a penny more, can you?
Well, I think that what you can guarantee is that if you don't bring more manufacturing jobs back into this country, you don't make our supply chains more stable, you're going to cause higher prices over the long term. I think that is what is absolutely true.
But you acknowledge they could wind up paying more?
What I acknowledge, Kristen, is that unless we bring more manufacturing jobs back to this country, we are going to end up paying more in the long term. Remember, the whole promise, now, again, this was a bipartisan thing. My own party was as wrong about it as Democrats were, and Donald Trump was right about it. What they said is that if you shipped all of our manufacturing to East Asia and to Mexico, Americans would pay lower prices. Well, here we are now, and Americans are paying higher prices. And just one more thing on this, Kristen, because it's really important to go at what Kamala Harris actually said in her convention speech. She says that she wants to stand up to China on behalf of American workers. If you're not willing to impose tariffs on companies that are manufacturing in China, using slave labor in China, you're not standing up to the Chinese, and Americans are really going to suffer.
And on pricing and prices right now, inflation obviously at its lowest level since 2021. But let's move on. Robert F. Kennedy, the big news yesterday.
Very big news.
He suspended his campaign, announced he's endorsing Donald Trump. He is also known as someone who has blamed vaccines for autism, antidepressants for school shootings, and recently said, quote, he won't take sides on what happened on 9/11. Do you have any hesitation about accepting his endorsement?
No, Kristen, I don't, because we're going to disagree on issues, right? There are things that Robert Kennedy has said that I disagree with. I'm sure there are things that he said, or that I've said, that he's going to disagree with. But I think what his endorsement represents is that Donald J. Trump's Republican Party is a big tent party. I was raised by two grandparents who are sort of classic blue dog Democrats. They believed in having a border. They believed that you shouldn't have censorship in the United States of America. They believed in common sense economic policies. They may have disagreed with Donald Trump about tax policy, but they believed in some fundamental American values. And I think what RFK's endorsement really shows is that the Kennedy Democrats are actually more at home in the Republican Party of Donald Trump. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris's party, higher prices, doing nothing to fight back against the Chinese, to say nothing of a wide open border. That is not JFK's Democratic Party. It's not RFK's Democratic Party. We're thrilled to have the Kennedy Democrats where they belong.
Well, and some in the Kennedy family have stepped forward to say that they sharply disagree with this endorsement. But let's just go back very quickly. He says he isn't taking.
Why are, because again, I know that J.D. Vance volunteered himself as tribute, and Trump at times take questions from reporters that obviously stand differently than him as far as fundamental issues. Why are these people so dead set on trying to prove a point? Because as a journalist, you ask the questions, the person responds with the question, and then you let the viewers determine whether or not it was a good answer or it was a bad answer. I often at times get criticism whenever I do interviews with people, and they say, well, Anton, why didn't you go after this person on this? Or Anton, why didn't you check this person on that? Because as an interviewer and as a journalist in that role with that hat on at that moment, it's different than a Monday night when you're debating against somebody and that's what it is that they're coming in for. when you interviewing somebody, you ask the question and you let them answer it, and your goal is to put them at ease so that they'll be more disclosing, they'll be more inclined to give you the information that you need, and then you let the audience and the people determine whatever it is that they want to determine, and they draw their own conclusions as a result of it. Why are these people so dead set, these women and these reporters and these journalists, so dead set on trying to go after people when they firstly volunteered themselves to even come on the platform to be interviewed and be asked questions in the first place? And Eric Daniels, I need you to do better. I need you to do better, Eric Daniels, because it's not about whether or not this organization does the same thing. If it's wrong, and you call it out across the board. I don't agree with 100% with everything that Fox News does. I don't agree with 100% with everything that CNN does. I gave CNN credit when they actually called the debate fair, and they was very, very fair with how it is that they ask questions or whatever. So you give credit where credit is due. You hold people accountable when it's accountable. But right now we're talking about NBC's Meet the Press. You can't justify it wrong by saying, well, they do it too. No. Why is this woman in particular doing what she's doing, and she's not doing it as a journalist is supposed to do it, as far as asking the hard questions and then letting the chips fall where they may? I don't agree with 100% of what anybody do. But you don't shift blame and try to justify why somebody else is doing it. You do it the way that you're supposed to do it, and you don't worry about everybody else.
Taking sides on 9/11. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, of course I don't agree with that, Kristen. Now, to be clear, I don't know what RFK actually said there. Maybe there was additional context. Of course, you actually have to see what people say before you agree or disagree with it. I certainly have taken sides in 9/11. I'm the pro-America side. I don't think that we should have been attacked, and I certainly think hitting back against the terrorists was justified. I don't know what RFK said there, but what I do know is that RFK said a lot of very interesting and important things, that the Democratic Party has become too pro-censorship, that the Democratic Party, especially in the wake of COVID, became really anti-freedom and anti-child. I mean, you had Democrats saying that we should be masking toddlers in their schools, even though we knew it caused developmental disabilities. I agree with RFK that that was crazy.
Well, to be fair, there was a lot of information that scientists were grappling with as it came in, and masks were perceived to stop the spread of the disease. Let's move on.
Totally fair.
Why does she always want to move on from something when he starts to address an issue that he's passionate about? No, it's not about let's move on. You can't just keep let's moving on in me.
Move on that I would say on that is there were important leaders. Donald Trump was among them. RFK was among them, who were saying some of this stuff is crazy. And if we had listened to them, I think our kids would have been much better off in the wake of the pandemic.
I mean, scientists did show that masks help to stop the spread of the disease. Let's talk about another big issue.
Disabilities for toddlers, right? We have to be able to balance this stuff. And I think the way that RFK struck that balance was much smarter.
Every single answer that he says, she got to get the last word. I don't think that I'll ever be interviewed by a woman again. I don't know. This is aggravating to me. Every single thing that he says, she got to throw in a jab. She got to throw in her word. She got to throw in her own personal opinion. She is not forcing him to do anything. She continues to try to spin and put in her own narrative in this interview. And this is one of the reasons why you will never see Kamala Harris go into hostile territory, because first of all, she's not prepared to be able to answer questions without a teleprompter automatically telling her what to say. And then secondly, it's always somebody that is trying to throw their own narrative in there. And we're here to see J.D. Vance, not necessarily you. Ms. Welker?
Fortunately, than the way that Kamala Harris did.
Let's talk about another big issue that was talked about at the Democratic National Convention. It's being talked about on the campaign trail: abortion.
Sure.
Democrats made the case this week and beyond this week that Donald Trump, if elected, will impose a federal ban on abortion if he wins. Now, Donald Trump says he won't. But can you commit, Senator, sitting right here with me today, that if you and Donald Trump are elected, that you will not impose a federal ban on abortion?
I can absolutely commit that, Kristen, and Donald Trump has been as clear about that as possible. I think it's important to step back and say, what has Donald Trump actually said on the abortion question, and how is it different from what Kamala Harris and the Democrats have said? Donald Trump wants to end this culture war over this particular topic. If California wants to have a different abortion policy from Ohio, then Ohio has to respect California and California has to respect Ohio. Donald Trump's view is that we want the individual states and their individual cultures and their unique political sensibilities to make these decisions, because we don't want to have a nonstop federal conflict over this issue. The federal government ought to be focused on getting food prices down and getting housing prices down, issues, of course, where Kamala Harris has been a total disaster. So I think Donald Trump is right. We want the federal government to focus on these big economic and immigration questions. Let the states figure out their own abortion policy.
Let me just follow up with you a little bit on that point, because I've been talking to Republicans, including Senator Lindsey Graham just last week, who've made it very clear that if Donald Trump is elected, if you are elected, they will continue to press this point. Senator Graham said to me, I'm going to keep saying that there should be a federal ban. If such a piece of legislation landed on Donald Trump.
Did we not just hear was the question not answered fully? He said, I can absolutely tell you that this is not going to happen. And what we actually are saying is that the feds shouldn't be inside of this conversation in the first place. So no, we are not going to institute a federal ban. California should be doing what they want to do according to the voters. Ohio should do what they want to do. Florida should do what they want to do. Texas should do what they want to do. New York should do what they want to do. Michigan should do what they want to do. He fully answered the question. He answered it, and then he added the context. I can guarantee you during our administration that this will not be an issue. I don't care what other Republicans are pushing for. Why is this something that you continue to ask me about? Because other people may have a difference of opinion that may be in the party, but this is what we're standing on. What the hell is going on in this interview? Honest to God.
Trump's desk. Would he veto it?
Well, I think it'd be very clear he would not support it. I mean, he said that explicitly. Yeah, I mean, if you're not supporting it as the president of the United States, you fundamentally have to veto it.
So he would veto a federal abortion ban?
I think he would. He said that explicitly that he would. And
I don't think he's ever said explicitly he would. He said that to you?
Lindsey Graham, Kristen, I would be surprised. I mean, again, I need to see the context on what Lindsey Graham said, because Lindsey Graham himself has not advocated a federal abortion ban. Lindsey Graham has advocated a federal minimum standard. Now, to be clear, that is not Donald Trump's view.
This guy is on it. He knows what he's talking about. He knows the context. He's not going to let you just throw a question at him without the addition. You see how he added the context? He said, hold on, wait. Let's be clear. Lindsey Graham didn't even say what you said that they were saying. Lindsey Graham, this is the full context of what Lindsey Graham was saying. And so it's kill him, JD. Kill him, JD. See, this is the stuff that they don't want to actually have a conversation about. Anybody can have a Democratic National Convention speech without any context. Very few people is willing to take the hardball questions from the ops and then give a full context answer that fully addresses what your issues are. That way you're very clear on where we stand on policy. Listen, on this policy with regard to abortions that they continue to beat y'all over the head with, and they come in with this false information and saying, if Donald Trump is president, this is what Kamala Harris said, he's going to enact a federal ban on abortion. Miss, why you lying? Why you always lying? Why you lying on me? That's not what I said. If Donald Trump is president, Stop. That's not what I said.
Disagrees with Lindsey Graham on this, but no Republican, at least no Republican with any reasonable power, is saying that we should have a complete national abortion ban. I haven't heard that from any of my colleagues. And to be clear, Donald Trump, I think, has staked his position and made it very explicit. He wants this to be a state decision. States are going to make this determination themselves.
All right, let's talk about women voters more broadly. The Census Bureau estimates there are 22 million women between the ages of 20 and 40 who, for whatever reason, do not have children. What do you say to those women who hear some of your comments, including childless cat lady comments, which you've been asked about, but who feel as though you won't represent them?
Well, I'd say, first of all, I will represent you. I want to be the vice president for the whole country, and I want to represent everybody. And yes, I made a sarcastic comment years ago that I think that a lot of Democrats have willfully misinterpreted. But what I've simply said is that I think that it's really a profound change that's happened in our country where we become anti-family, and I would like to change that. And I think if you talk to young women, whether they have children or don't want to have children, what you consistently hear is that a lot of young women feel like they don't have options. I saw this with my own wife, who's a working mother, who's a very, very accomplished litigator. She has 3 beautiful kids and always felt like she was having to balance being a good mom with being the kind of litigator that she wanted to be. I just want women to have more choices. I've seen that very personally in my own family, and I think it's something that is broken about our country.
I'm trying to
Let
interrupt
me zoom
you.
out a little bit. Then you're calling it a sarcastic comment,
Sure.
and yet some women, and you got the feedback in real time,
gonna read that super
felt
chat
like
shortly.
it was a gut punch to them personally. Do you regret making that comment?
Look, I regret certainly that a lot of people took it the wrong way, and I certainly regret that the DNC and Kamala Harris lied about it.
But do you
look,
regret what you said, Senator?
Look, Kristen, I'm going to say things from time to time that people disagree with. I'm a real person. I'm going to make jokes. I'm going to say things sarcastically. And I think that what's important is that we focus on the policy. There are certainly going to be things that I say if I'm elected vice president, people are going to say, well, I wish he had said that differently. I think it's most important to actually be the person I actually am and to say, those sarcastic comments were made in the service of a real substantive point. This country has become too anti-family. It's too expensive to afford a house. It's too expensive to afford groceries. Donald Trump and I want to change that. And unless we get better leadership, we're not going to.
But again, just very quickly, given that people have told you directly, have spoken out, have said that they were offended, they were hurt by those comments, do you wish you never made those childless cat lady comments?
I think that it's much more important for me to just be a normal human being who sometimes says
So
things
no
that people
regrets.
disagree with. I have a lot of regrets, Kristen, but making a joke 3 years ago is not in the top 10 of the list.
All right, another big topic in this race is immigration. There has been a lot of discussion.
Did they say racist immigration? Let me back that up real quick.
In the list.
All right, another big topic in this race is immigration.
Oh, and this race is immigration. Got it.
There's been a lot of discussion about Donald Trump's plans for mass deportation.
Yeah.
According to one estimate, more than 11 million U.S. citizens live in households with mixed immigration status, including more than 5 million children. If you and former President Trump were elected, would you separate families as a part of your mass deportation effort?
Well, we have to start with the foundation
Would you separate families? Is that what she just said?
issue here, which is we have 25 million illegal aliens in this country right now because Kamala Harris has refused to do her job.
I have to, very quickly,
do-
DHS says it's much lower. It's closer to 8 million.
I think
don't
they're-
know. Where do you get the 25 million from?
Well, I think the 25 million are the people that should have been deported that maybe weren't deported, plus you had another 12 to 15 million that have come in since Kamala Harris. Look,
DHS
whatever the number
disputes
is,
that number for the record. They say it's
Fair.
closer to 8 to 10 million.
but I think there are
please
reasons to
continue.
think that DHS is underestimating. Whatever the real number is, it's way too high, right? It's millions upon millions of illegal immigrants that have come in just since Kamala Harris became the borders.
Is she caping for Kamala? Is her and Kamala friends? Can somebody go and check the record and see if they actually related or if they got some kind of, they father, what, stepdad, cousins, distant cousins, third cousins? Somebody tell me.
Are a few years ago. The
She was
first
put in
thing-
charge of the root causes of migration. Go ahead.
Well, the root causes of migration, I would say, Kristen, is that Kamala Harris refuses to do her job as borders are. And let's just start there. I want to answer your question, but I think it's important to sort of sequence this in the right way. So if you want to get control of the illegal immigration problem, you have to stop the bleeding. You have to stop so many people from coming here illegally in the first place. And that means undoing everything that Kamala Harris did practically on day one of the administration. You have to reimpose deportations. You have to stop catch and release. Stop granting asylum to every single person who comes in here and says that they need asylum, and stop granting mass parole. These policies are why we have the immigration crisis that we have. So I think focus on fixing the problem. Before we even fix the problem, we've got to stop the problem from getting worse.
And as you know, President Biden passed a series of executive actions, and illegal border crossings are now at their lowest levels in about 5 years, so much so that Greg
Over the last 2 months. Let me add the additional context. See, I'm very well versed on this. Over the last 2 months since June, we actually addressed this on Friday, or was it Thursday? Since June, right? Since June, they've had their lowest levels of illegal border crossings that's been recorded since the administration took office in 2021 in January. Let me say that again for the people in the back, because just because her eyes is big and she got on a lot of makeup don't mean that it's not exactly the way that we framing it. Since June, 2 months ago. So they've recorded illegal immigration over the last 2 months, and they're saying, hey, it's at its lowest levels now. It's at its lowest levels now. Wait a minute. Let's add some additional context into that. I thought that y'all couldn't stop illegal immigration into this country unless y'all had a bipartisan deal. I thought that bipartisan deals and agreements, because y'all was blaming Trump for actually stopping the bipartisan agreement, and y'all said out of y'all own mouth that it was a bipartisan deal that we needed to stop. Okay, so wait a minute. So just over the last 2 months since we in election season, y'all decided to stop it from coming over the border, but y'all could have did that the last 3.5 years. Interesting.
Abbott is no longer busing people to other cities. But let me ask this fundamental question,
please.
Senator. Fundamental question. Will families be separated under your mass deportation?
And again, because you made a point here, I do want to answer this question about families and about deportations. But you made this point that border crossings are lower. Border crossings at the southern border are lower because the Harris administration is sending more immigrants through the ports of entry. So instead of coming through the southern border, they're now being flown at taxpayer expense to the ports of entry all over our country.
I didn't know that part. Thank you, JD. Let me give JD a round of applause. That boy is a master with the word. That boy is a master with the wordsmith game.
Number of illegal crossings, Kristen, this is a really important point. They're not any lower. They're just shuffling how the people are coming into the country in the first place. And this is very important.
They're able to process them more efficiently, but Greg Abbott's not setting them to other
Kristen,
states.
I don't want a border czar who makes it more efficient for illegal immigrants to come into this country. That's why we have the problem that we have.
Senator, to this question, because so many people want to know the answer to this, will families be separated under your mass deportation policy?
I think that families are currently being separated, and you're...
Hold on, we're not just going to skip the fact that they just juked the numbers on us. Hold on. Did they just do the same thing that Chicago be doing? Oh, no, actually recorded crime is down. No, the way that you shuffling the numbers around because you have less people responding and putting in the numbers, that's why it seemed like the crime is down. You just not reporting it as the same way. They coming in, they doing the crime the same way. You just reclassified the crime as something else. Oh, that's not a violent crime. That is now a simple crime. We've reclassified the way that we document what crime is, and they didn't catch that one over there. So we never responded to that. So we just can't juke the books. Come on, man. Come on, bro. Let them answer this question, and we're going to move on.
Certainly going to have to deport some people in this country. Now, I think you
so
start
that's a yes?
I think you start with the most violent criminals in our country. Those people need to be deported. That's where you focus federal resources. I think you, of course, have a number of children who are currently living with drug cartel members, not actually their families. We need to, of course, find their families and get them back to their families. But it's very interesting here because what Kamala Harris says is that Donald Trump wants to separate families. Kamala Harris's policies have led to thousands upon thousands of migrant children living with sex traffickers and drug cartels.
Well,
that is the consequence of her policies.
But there's not a...
Talk to him. I don't want to hear no more from this lady. She aggravate me. She aggravate my skin. She make my skin crawl. Keep on doing this. But she married, what's her name? Kristen Welker? Let me just see something. No way she can be in a relationship. No way she can be in a relationship. I just got to know. Kristen Welker. She is married. She's been married since John Hughes. Oh, she married to a white man. Is that her? Oh. Well, one thing that we don't do, I just wanted to find out if she was married in general. The one thing that we don't do is we don't talk about spouses. We don't talk about spouses. We don't go into children. He's not a part of this live stream, but we definitely just wanted to find out we wanted to find out what was going on. So shout out to her. Shout out to that. Very, very, very combative woman. Very, very combative woman. Let me read some of these super chats and then we're going to go ahead and get into the show. We're going to get into the thick of things for real. Mr. Daniels, how can we watch the video that dropped yesterday